Hello, and welcome to our session. We've all heard about digital transformation for over 10 years, and it seems to mean different things to different people. But today, we're talking about the drive to update and transform the legacy systems that enterprises have been using. To operate efficiently, we need to connect. Systems must work together, and we have to be able to access the right business information at the right time. So we are going to explore the differences between SaaS offerings in the cloud and on-premise legacy systems. Because as technology has enabled such rapid growth in the past 2 years, there is now more urgency for many of our large manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors to catch up with their technology. That sets our scene. So now, let us welcome our guest, Steve Vitale from EY. Steve, please tell us a bit about your company and what you do.
Hi, Sylvie. It's good to speak with you again. As way of background, I'm a senior manager in EY's Indirect tax technology practice, where I'm really focused on helping our clients use technology across all our indirect tax types for compliance, controversy, and planning. At EY, we commonly do this using our EY Global Tax Platform for indirect taxes, which is a software as a service solution that ultimately helps our clients gain access to data, gain visibility to the data, and ultimately drive value for their organization.
That's great, Steve. Let's talk the compliance aspect. With e-commerce happening around the clock and around the world, global compliance in multiple countries and jurisdictions depending upon being able to know everything about every transaction almost in real time, the stakes are high, and you can imagine that means that the risk is also high. Let's take, for example, exemption certificates. Normally, a person is required to review each certificate to make sure that they're properly filled out and it is also the right certificate. But with the speed of e-commerce, these certificates are piling up and there's real risk in missing one. And here's where a SaaS offering can help, right? By automating the process, it makes it possible to keep up. So let's talk for a moment about some differences between traditional on-premise solutions and SaaS solutions in the world of tax compliance.
Yeah, SaaS offerings provide way more technology options. The availability of more power and to be able to scale that power up and down. And ultimately, that leads to a more cost-effective solution, both from an implementation and an ongoing maintenance. Almost every time we do an on-prem versus a SaaS cost-benefit analysis, we land on the SaaS solution because of that scalability, both in power and data size.
Yeah, it makes total sense. How about if you use the same example as I did, exemption certificates?
Sure. I mean, it's a perfect example. We're in a very dynamic tax environment right now. The implications of Wayfair and work from home, the advanced audit practices are really shifting the paradigm for exemption certificates management and the need for that to be as accurate as possible. And what we've realized is in order to have a high level of accuracy in exemption certificates, it sometimes starts with the data. If the data is flawed or broken, then when it feeds into the exemption certificate solutions, there's gaps. And so what we first do is we really look to address the data model through the EY Global Tax Platform. And then we integrate that data solution into Avalara cert capture, which provides an end-to-end exemption certificate solution.
That's fantastic. I think one of the issues that you discover is the Wayfair and how it affected exemption certificates. And totally understandable about SaaS solutions, they're more practical. How do you talk to companies about choosing a SaaS solution?
Yeah, we try to be agnostic and focus on the cost-benefit analysis, but ultimately we really want to focus on addressing the tax pain point. You know, what is the business challenge that we're solving for? In some instances, our clients will have a very traditional on-prem focus. But what we're seeing is almost every organization has some sort of cloud strategy. And so when we look at the business challenge and we do a cost-benefit analysis on the solution for that business challenge, if SaaS is the right answer, we usually can talk to the right people and have the right discussions about implementing a SaaS strategy.
That makes total sense to me. So by now, the consensus is that SaaS is more flexible overall. But the choice to go with a SaaS offering has to be carefully considered. Wouldn't you agree? When a business is trying to move from an on-prem solution, how do you talk to them about the type of vendors that they need?
Yeah, the data strategy has to be the starting point, and we need to identify all the possible sources of data that exist, and sometimes that data is hidden from our tax departments. It's in the ERP system, but our tax department doesn't have access to it. Once we identify all those data sources, then we map it into a common data model. Ultimately, the objective is for the tax department to use this data holistically and reduce the burden on that organization. Once we have the right data model, then we can start to identify what business challenges can be addressed, where can value be driven with that data model, and identify the right tax softwares, the softwares to plug into ultimately.
Wow. Can you share an experience where you've done that?
Yeah, for example, I got one client that was using, the challenge was to use fixed asset data to complete property tax compliance and property tax advisory. When we dug into the client's environment, we realized they were already getting that fixed asset data for tax depreciation, for provision, for state apportionment, and we didn't want to create one more fixed asset data feed for property tax. So what we did is we said, let's look at all of the reasons why tax department would need fixed asset data, and let's define one data feed from fixed assets to the data model, ultimately within our global tax platform. Once we had that, we can map that data to the data model and drive the property tax compliance solution as well as the advisory solution. The interesting point of this was, as we were going through this exercise, we realized that we could also use the fixed asset data to have more accurate citing for sales and use tax. So that data model is really the starting point, because once you can have the data model, there's a lot of different business challenges that can be solved.
That is just, amazing. So when you consider the importance of data, as you mentioned, it seems that companies should not be shy to make the move, right? More and more, they're starting to see that getting stuck in an old-fashioned on-prem solution might not be a best idea. What do you think?
Yeah, we're seeing the economy as a whole move to the SaaS offerings, and almost every organization has some sort of cloud strategy or SaaS strategy. And so the tax department really needs to understand what their company's evolving cloud strategy is, so that tax evolves with the company. Too often we see tax being the last thing that's addressed from an IT infrastructure perspective. We really want tax to start to be more proactive in thinking about technology, and here it really does come down to SaaS.
Wouldn't that be great? Tax being in front of everything else, that'll be fantastic. What are
We can hope and dream.
What are companies saying about security concerns? Every time we talk about SaaS, there's always some kind of concern on security.
Yeah, it's an important topic, and we get a lot of security questions, and I've done a ton of security reviews, and we have to be mindful of our clients' desire to want to protect their organizations. So data security is absolutely critical. Now, what we generally realize in going through that process is a lot of clients will have robust IT security questionnaires. There's all kinds, in those questionnaires, there's all kinds of outlines around where's the data hosted and what are the security protocols, what's the disaster recovery. The reality is we've worked through all of those questions many times, as has Avalara. And so we really have a paradigm where data security is important, but the cloud offerings it's not an intangible concept. The reality is the data just doesn't go into space. It goes to a tangible data center, and there are very robust security measures around those data centers. So it's a great conversation to have, and both EY and in my experience working with Avalara, welcome that conversation from a data security perspective.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear. What would your advice be for any company that is really struggling with this shift to a SaaS offering?
Yeah, I generally see the historic on-prem departments making the shift to SaaS being focused around value-driving opportunities. So the question becomes, where does value exist? And maybe it's even existed for years, but we weren't able to get it because of the challenges in the data or the processing. Sometimes the value-driving idea requires a lot of data and a lot of data processing, and that can get expensive in a traditional on-prem environment. So if we can identify what are those value-driving ideas, bring them back to light, then that drives forward the SaaS solution, because that's how you get a better cost-benefit analysis to achieve that value opportunity. So SaaS is really the move forward for tax departments, because then once you're able to do it for the planning and the value driving, it becomes very tangible for our compliance and controversy functions as well.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So really tangible example. Many of our clients are doing a manual use tax review, right? So you go through this effort, you might have a tax engine in place, and you are reviewing the results, and you identify that even though the tax engine is the perfect technology and product, the data going into the tax engine was flawed. And so that gives you the answer that the tax engine should have given, because the data was flawed. So now our departments are reviewing the results. Well, that can be a time-consuming process. It's also a big data effort. With platforms like GTP, we can use a layer of artificial intelligence and actually sit that artificial intelligence on top of the data strategy to automate the use tax review, and then we connect into the Avalara tax engine. So it's a great paradigm of taking a historical tax engine solution that's been around for a while, the challenges of a manual use tax review and the value that automating that can bring, and pulling it all together into a holistic SaaS offering.
Wow, it's amazing to hear that we can actually bring all of these things together and try to create a wonderful SaaS solution. As we mentioned, it is very flexible, and you certainly gave us great examples. So, Steve, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's very good to be with you.